sleep. I never sleep. I just wait in the shadows, and I will kill you all. Everyone who sniffed the air that day in Siwa!
Vengeance may not always be the answer, nor does it always bring closure. Some get lost in their retribution, hell-bent on repaying the pain and loss they suffered 100 times over on those responsible. You could argue Bayek of Siwa lost himself to his rage, his pain, his regret, his loss. While we've seen countless of revenge stories, people tormented by their failures and plagued with thoughts of what could have been, dictating the low points of an otherwise electrifying ride of revenge, Bayek's story, while at the start is led by revenge, it's much more unique than that. It's much more than just demanding blood for blood. Bayek lost everything, his son Khemu, his marriage to a woman he so clearly adored, and when it seemed most likely that the perpetrators that killed his son would finally fall to justice, they killed his best friend, doing so in almost the exact same spot and way they took Khemu, a reminder of the failure Bayek felt as a father and as a protector. Out of the ashes of his closest loved ones and a bright future as a family man, he would still find a purpose, going on to establish the Hidden Ones, the first ever interpretation of the Brotherhood of Assassins, a secret peacekeeping organization dedicated to protecting humanity from abuses of power, coercive rule, and injustice that eventually becomes a worldwide entity working in the shadows. One that not only carried core tenets tied to Bayek's former position of being a Medjay, but some personal exercises his father taught him to master his own fear. One such exercise in particular would come to be known as the Leap of Faith, transcending generations and eventually becoming a core requirement for one's initiation into the Brotherhood.
The Order of Ancients, they are responsible for my exile. They tore me from my throne.
Now the snake has many heads. Those heads make up the Order.
Now before we go down Bayek's path of wrath, we should begin with what was lost and how everything came together leading up to the day of Khemu's death. In 59 BCE, Ptolemy XIII became co-ruler of Egypt alongside his sister Cleopatra, whom he had married as part of Egyptian customs at the time. The Order of Ancients, in essence a secretive religious collective that spanned across Greece, Rome, and Persia, already had a presence here within Egypt. With the death of Ptolemy XII and a shared throne between his children, the Order saw this as an opportunity to consolidate its power in a somewhat more vulnerable Egypt. Initially, the Order would actually approach Cleopatra. She was the older and, unfortunately for the Order, more ambitious of the siblings. She would reject their attempts to persuade her to their cause. Undeterred by this, they would instead focus their efforts on Ptolemy. And over a relatively short period of time, they would continue to find more and more success with effectively persuading her brother and husband Ptolemy to not only fully join their cause, but to exile Cleopatra and take the throne for himself. Ptolemy would go a step further, full-on declaring his sister a criminal, a decree that definitely would have brought death had it not been for the help of her friend Apollodorus in escaping Alexandria and allowing her to put together an effective strategy to retake the throne from her traitorous younger brother. Meanwhile, as Cleopatra was preoccupied with escaping with her life, Ptolemy was weak-willed and easily manipulated, completely ignorant of the fact that the Order was actually using him to shape Egypt however they saw it. He made for the perfect puppet, a tool they wasted no time in utilizing. The Order's earliest moves with the biggest ramifications in Bayek's life and outcome of Egypt's history would be Ptolemy placing a man by the name of Medunamun as the Oracle of Amun in Siwa. This by itself was a significant role, and on the surface it seemed as a move that aimed to exert influence over the neighboring village of Siwa on behalf of Ptolemy. It was much more complicated than just placing this man here to strengthen the pharaoh's influence over a distant and remote village, though. The truth was much more elusive than that. Medunamun's real interest wasn't to improve the pharaoh's power here. He actually cared little about the grandiosity of superficial titles such as this. What he was really after was opening up a vault located under the Temple of Amun in Siwa, a temple he believed was well known to Siwa's last remaining protector, the Medjay known as Bayek. This misunderstanding and false belief of Bayek knowing anything about this vault would be the very reason why he would come to be of keen interest to the Order and the pharaoh when they arrive in Siwa. As Medunamun assumed his role as the oracle and readied for the pharaoh's arrival, bringing with them the dark cloud of the oppressive Order, the people of Siwa weren't naive to everything waiting for them just around the corner. In fact, they received this new, soon-to-be oppression with complete open arms, hopeful that this new oracle would enhance their circumstances. He must, as the pharaoh himself was in their humble village. To finalize this vision of hope, a grand celebration was planned to welcome the pharaoh. With Bayek serving as the Medjay of this region, he would be assigned by Medunamun himself with the illustrious task of hunting an ibex for the festivities ahead. With this single act, the order would be able to isolate Bayek, know exactly where he was based off the animal he was meant to hunt, and effectively corner him and drag him to the temple entrance. Willingly or by force was completely up to Bayek.
Every morning of my childhood, my father and I spoke the prayer of the Medjay, a promise to those in need. I am a Medjay. I am a feather in the eagle's wing, a living dagger plunged from the sky into the heart of chaos. I am a truth unknown, a scabbard unfilled, a son of the Nile, and a defender of the people. You cannot kill me, for I walk among the dead. Come forth by day, and I will guide you home. My son should have learned this prayer from me.
With Medunamun in place as acting oracle and the pharaoh's arrival opening the floodgates of pure damnation to unleash on the small village of Siwa, we can now focus on Bayek, the last remaining Medjay of Egypt. To many, the title of the Medjay was a relic of the past, a symbol of the old hierarchy of power that has long been disposed of, but to Bayek, it was much more than just a simple pledge to protect the pharaoh. It was a dedication to the people, which in of itself is no small promise, but it was a pledge that was also strengthened and intertwined with the pride of Bayek's family heritage. His father was a well-known Medjay before him. His wife Aya was also a Medjay, or at the very least taught to fight like one, and so naturally Bayek hoped his son Hemu would follow in his father and his grandfather's footsteps. While the Medjay's prayer you just heard was telling enough, the day of the festivities in celebration of the pharaoh's arrival that was set to take place later in the night, during the day we see what time was like between Bayek and Hemu. He spends this downtime to teach his son how to use his bow, how to hunt, how to master his fear, and what it truly meant to be a Medjay. It's not just in service to the pharaoh, as the title once implied, but a commitment to the well-being of everyone of Egypt, to actively work for the benefit of others. Bayek would also enlighten Hemu that as a child he wasn't too different than his son. His son struggles to be as brave as his father, or not fully given to his fear to the point of being teased. Hemu would be teased by his friend Chenzera on the topic of one day becoming a Medjay, saying he's too scared. He doesn't have the bravery or composure to be in such a position. Hemu's courage, or apparent lack of it, would compel Bayek to express some vulnerability to his son. He would admit to Hemu that around his age he too struggled to find his composure. It was something he himself had a very difficult time getting a hold of until his father took him to the edge of a cliff and spoke one single word.
What did your father say?
Jump!
With that very word, an action, Bayek's father would create one of the initiations one must complete in order to be part of one of the greatest organizations to ever grace this world. Hemu, unfortunately though, was not ready and would fall back in fear. Bayek would respond disappointingly at his son's unpreparedness to follow in his shoes and begins to gather his and Hemu's things, preparing to leave when a scream from Chenzera can be heard in the distance. Guards dispatched by the Order of Ancients were tasked with capturing the Medjay, using Chenzera to track down Bayek and lure him out, fully aware the Medjay's vow to protect those in peril. Bayek would instruct Hemu to run home to his mother Aya, while Bayek would stay behind and deal with the soldiers, and ensuring Chenzera's safety. A simple enough request, but Hemu's fear of going home alone would frustrate his father once again. This would lead Bayek to plead rather aggressively with his son to listen and just go, as it'd be best for everyone if Hemu was out of harm's way, allowing Bayek to focus on the soldiers and Chenzera's safety. The demand to listen would finally get through to him, and Hemu would leave at the perfect time as a soldier would appear. Chenzera grasped firmly in his hand. The soldier would demand the Medjay follow him. Bayek would oblige, and as soon as he turned the corner, Chenzera would be freed by the guard, and Bayek is attacked by all of the soldiers waiting for him. Overwhelmed, 5-1, Bayek is knocked unconscious. Sometime while he's out of it, Khemu would be captured by guards on his way home. Now, since Bayek and Aya were well known all around Siwa, it wasn't too difficult for the guards to realize Khemu was the son of the Medjay. And so they would decide to drag Khemu back to the vault inside the Temple of Amun and use him as leverage to get Bayek to cooperate with opening said vault. The capture and transporting of both Khemu and Bayek had to be done covertly. Remember, placing Bayek in a hunting environment far from observers was intentional, as Bayek was well known and he was loved all over Siwa. Ptolemy had no such affection in the area by the locals, so Bayek's arrest or any kind of trouble brought to him would be a potential disaster, representing Ptolemy as a tyrant before any celebration or change of heart in favor towards the pharaoh can even begin. And that's not even to mention the possibility of revealing the Order of Ancients and their interests here within Siwa, so cornering Bayek out in the wilderness and moving Bayek back to the temple would require the guards to do it slowly, keeping to the shadows, and only once darkness fell upon Siwa then could they present the Medjay here within the temple. As Bayek was moved through the Temple of Amun with his hands fastened tightly behind his back, the oppression of Medunamun and the Order was in full display. A masked one, Bayek's second time facing one, as he seen them posed behind Pharaoh Ptolemy as he entered Siwa just hours before, would walk Bayek through the temple, informing him that none of the priests had been cooperative with accessing the inner contents of the vault up until now. But as the Medjay of Siwa, who believed to know all the secrets of Siwa, it was Bayek's duty to help relieve the oppression of the priests by helping the Order open up the vault. It was Bayek who could save everyone so long as he gave the masked ones precisely what they wanted. Unfortunately for Bayek, this would be the very first time that he even was aware of the vault, let alone know how to open it. He could truly be of no use even if he wanted to. Prepared for opposition, the masked ones would present Bayek with his son Khemu, demanding that if Bayek doesn't open up the vault, they would cut out the boy's heart, not only killing his son, but denying the child entry into the afterlife. As tensions began to increase and Bayek pleaded with his captors to hear him and believe that he truly held no information of value, the masked ones would shift their focus from Bayek to the pharaoh. Ptolemy was still naive to the Order and what they were all truly doing here. The Order hoped to keep it that way, so as they dispersed outside the vault to attend to the unexpected arrival of the pharaoh, they would leave 2 members behind to keep an eye on the Medjay and his son, giving the father and son time to speak to each other, and as the Order hoped, through the reason provided from his son, Bayek would yield, revealing the secret to the vault's entry. However, the conversation between these two was very different, albeit quite brief. In an unusual show of bravery and defiance, Khemu would take this opportunity to make his father proud. Defying his father's request, Khemu would sneak up to one of the masked ones guarding the door, and with his back turned to Khemu, he would lift the dagger out of the guard's waistband, running back and handing it to Bayek. With the weapon now covertly within Bayek's position, the hope of Bayek's freedom and subsequent turn of events in their favor would be quickly dashed as the masked ones returned into the room with more aggression than before. They were out of time and were much more wary of being discovered. Now was Bayek's time to share what he knows, or Khemu's heart will be in their hands. Bayek would plead with them one final time, but now everything was falling on deaf ears. As the masked ones moved to separate Khemu from his father, one of them grabs Bayek at the exact moment where he manages to break free. Dagger firmly in hand, the masked one will say one final thing to Bayek and step out of the way.
The snake takes that as your answer.
No! No! Help! Help!
Khemu was dead, by Bayek's own hands. It's important to share that everyone in this room believed Bayek was dead, but he was simply knocked unconscious. Sometime later he would come to, staring at the heart-wrenching sight of his son's lifeless body, something that he had done. The final day he spent with his son. They spoke of Bayek's past, hopeful of Khemu's future. He was teaching his son how to use his bow, and while he disappointed earlier in his lack of bravery at the cliff, he died with one final act of bravery. Bayek would take his son and bury him with the rest of his kin on the Mountain of the Dead. As a way to always keep his son by him, he would take Khemu's necklace and wear it around his neck. a small eagle skull. It's just one more small way Hemu's death triggered the earliest foundation of the Brotherhood, which we'll circle around much later. But for now, determined more than ever to avenge his son's death, there would be one more tragedy for Bayek to suffer through: the end of his marriage. His wife Aya couldn't handle Hemu's death any more than Bayek could. Where Bayek would become obsessed with bringing those responsible to justice, Aya, on the other hand, just couldn't come to terms with the loss of her only son. She would leave the family home in Siwa and head to the city of Alexandria. In response to this, Bayek too would abandon not only his home but his possession of Medjay in Siwa, leaving his previous duties to his best friend Hepzibah. For the next year, Bayek would devote himself entirely to finding everyone in that room the day his son lost his life. Consumed by his revenge and determination, Bayek would slowly learn the aliases of the masked men and carve their names into his skin. The name of the heron, the ibis, the vulture, the ram, and the snake would all be aliases he would never forget. Only once their blood ran across his blade could he then, in satisfaction, carve out their names and rest a little easier knowing these men, as he put it, had their guts baking in the sun. Bayek would refuse to properly rest, or perhaps incapable of appropriate rest due to killing his son, haunted by such tragedy. Eventually, Bayek's work would finally pay off with the heron, whose real name was Rujek, would fall first.
You are the Medjay from Siwa. I thought Medjay was supposed to protect the Pharaoh. I am Medjay to no Pharaoh. You see this? I can read my own name, Nat. We will find you. We will find you in your sleep.
The killing of Rujek is the point where we join Bayek's journey, but this moment has been over a year of dutiful searching, exhausting searching, his anger completely unleashed, and Rujek's pure terror of facing a man that has lost everything, determined to kill everyone that sniffed the air that day in Siwa. The depth of Bayek's anger is unleashed in many ways through Rujek's killing, the satisfaction accompanied by the pain of cutting out Rujek's name off his arm, to then symbolically kill him by shoving the mask he wore with the dagger driven into it. A father's pain, left to his own devices of getting even. But there's much more to just Bayek's determination. At this point, he's all about blood for blood. I would say right now it's a mixture of indulgence in the violence due to the massive amount of time that has gone by. Most people, as time passes, time itself only feeds the anger or emotions you reserve about a particular situation, especially if you continue to be reminded about said situation and dwell on such a thing. The death of your son, one that happened because of your own hands, on top of carving in the men's names responsible for said situation, you can only imagine the mentality and drive to get out of such a dark place. With Rujek killed, Bayek would turn his attention back to his home of Siwa, and some of the first things his friends Hepzibah and Rabia comment on is his appearance. He's grown out his hair, his beard is unkempt, he's covered in blood and looks terribly drained, but when they request he finally get a little bit of rest, he simply says he's fine. He refuses to sleep until his mission is done. It's not until at Rabia's request to at least patch him up does he accidentally drift off into a deep sleep. A well-needed rest he hasn't had possibly since the day Hemu was killed. Now, while we were focusing on Siwa, the circumstances of the village have changed drastically since Bayek was last here over a year ago. While Hepzibah assumed the position as an acting Medjay and protector of Siwa, there's little he could do in the face of the oppression Medunamun has unleashed on the locals. The villagers have been stripped of all their weapons. They are beaten, questioned, and taxed anywhere they go. If a villager is believed to be lying to them as punishment, their entire neighborhood is razed to the ground. Medunamun, who Bayek has learned is one of the masked ones he hunts that goes by the alias the Ibis, uses the garrison as a way to keep the entire region under his heel. As if having a hand in Hemu's death wasn't enough, Medunamun's reign of terror has only continued over Bayek's people. While Bayek continues to be driven in his quest for revenge on behalf of his son, the death of the Ibis would serve as not only one more step to avenging Hemu, but would be one final act as Medjay to the people he dutifully served his entire life. Hepzibah would inform him on the situation of the entire village, the best way to slowly weaken the grip Medunamun has on them, arm himself, and most importantly, return his old companion, Senu, a close friend of his that Bayek believed was killed, but Rabia has actually gracefully nursed the bird back to health in the year of Bayek's absence. With Senu by his side and pointed in the right direction, he can now properly get to work. Now, as you move through Siwa, the village and the locals are helpful in making this place feel like it truly has history. Everyone says hello to Bayek and greet him as if their prayers have truly been answered, for their savior has returned. But he's not here on a quest to relax or reunite with anyone, or really fully dedicate himself to the people just yet. While they are happy to see him and he's happy to help and free them from their oppression, there's a hollow feeling here, an air of sadness that's elaborated on when Bayek returns to his old home to retrieve his sword. If you do so, there's a cutscene that triggers.
Papa, you found it. Can I have it back?
These walls, this place, it holds nothing but ghosts for him. Even with Medunamun slain, there's nothing here for him. Even if there was, the Ibis is only the second out of 5 targets. He won't return for some time. In the event that he does, would there even be a purpose if his loved ones aren't here? These are genuine questions he doesn't seem to fully come to ask himself, as later, he does pursue that very dream with Aya. But for now, with a kiss of a son's toy, a reminder of what he's come here to do, now was time to go out and hunt. His prey Medunamun was guarded up in the Temple of Amun, with the finest soldiers the garrison station in Siwa could put together, but this didn't even pose the slightest challenge to Bayek. He would sneak through, get past other guards, and just as he did with Rujek, Bayek would confront Medunamun. However, much more time is actually spent with Medunamun than his predecessor. Seething with rage and armed with an eagle feather to send Medunamun to the afterlife, Bayek would hesitate, stopped in his tracks by the sound of Khemu's voice. Now, in the context of how Bayek's story is told, this is where we learn of Khemu's death and how the Medjay renounced his former position in favor of a quest for blood. Since we already covered this, the critical thing to highlight is after hearing Khemu's voice, recalling the events of that fateful day, and being scared by the vision of a deceased Khemu arising to take the form of Medunamun, it all just feeds Bayek's anger. Medunamun would taunt Bayek on his failures, his inability to keep his son or his people safe.
You could not even save your own son. You are no one. Bayek of nothing, father to nobody!
And here is your nobody!
In response to this, he'd be brutally bludgeoned to death by the very artifact he presented to Bayek in front of the vault over a year ago. It's a violent beating fueled by the eruption of emotions Medunamun's words only agitated. Bayek would later recall this killing to his wife Aya, admitting it's a death he took great pleasure in. With the Ibis, the false oracle Medunamun now dead, Siwa is able to collectively breathe a sigh of relief. Bayek would return to his friend Hepzibah, sharing his success with Medunamun's assassination, and with it, Siwa being placed on track to returning to its former glory that Hepzibah would have to oversee. As Bayek would now head towards the great city of Alexandria to meet with his wife, Aya.
I missed you.
Similar to the situation with Hepzibah, Bayek has not seen Aya since the death of Khemu. While he's been preoccupied with the killing of the masked ones, Aya has went to the city of Alexandria to live with their cousin, Phanos. Her time in the city has been well spent improving her education at the Library of Alexandria, learning ancient history, philosophy, mathematics, and various languages that'll be a vital part in brokering some kind of alliance between Rome and Cleopatra much later. But in the meantime, she would also make her own progress in hunting down the masked ones responsible for the death of Khemu. Suspicious of a man by the name of Actaeon, Aya hunted him down, and she would find a mask similar to the ones worn by Khemu's killers inside of Actaeon's apartment. When Actaeon would return home, Aya would force him to wear his mask, and upon donning it on, she would thrust her dagger through one of his eye slits, killing him. Actaeon's body would later be discovered by another masked one, a close friend of his by the name of Katasos. Out of retribution, Katasos would hunt Aya down, but he would easily just fall to her blade, just like Actaeon before. Actaeon and Katasos were known as the Vulture and the Ram. Aya effectively killed the other two out of the 5 men Bayek was hunting, leaving just the snake. But the snake was a problem that Bayek would have to deal with by himself. With the death of Actaeon and Katasos, Alexandria became a very dangerous city for Aya. Gennadios, the leader of the Phylakes, which in essence was a Greco-Roman elite paramilitary group, has been aggressively hunting Aya for the killings she's perpetrated. Gennadios has been heading aggressive and rather brutal house searches for Aya, torturing anyone for the smallest amounts of information out of them. Fortunately, as thanks for the efforts Aya has made in killing mutual enemies, Apollodorus has helped secure Aya a hideout in the center of Alexandria underneath the city, but until Gennadios is taken care of, Aya is a prisoner within her own safe house. And this is where Bayek would find her. In the middle of the pair sharing the progress they've made, the happiness in the reunion, and the admittance of pleasure in bludgeoning Medunamun, or Aya's look of quiet acceptance that this is their life now, you can't help but mourn what they once had. Now, I don't want to get ahead of myself, but during this time in the cave while Aya's helping Bayek shave, she shares her story of forcing her dagger through the eye slits of Actaeon's mask.
Actaeon. I hunted him down and discovered a mask in his room. When he returned, I forced him to wear it. Then I thrust this knife through his eye slits.
Aya.
The look in Bayek's eyes says it all. He doesn't like that she had to commit such a heinous act, but to her it's almost as if she's numb to it. Yeah, it sucks, but what can you do? As their journey of hunting down the remaining masked ones and weakening their grip on Egypt progress, Aya would say this to Bayek.
You and I are pledged to violence. Now. And always.
And I believe it's all the way back in this quiet moment between the two of them that you can first start to see that truly being their reality. You can almost feel it between the two of them, and Bayek tries to lighten the mood and lift their spirits by saying there's at least just one more, that being the snake. Of course they're far from it, but it's all about one step at a time. First Bayek must kill Gennadios, allowing Aya to be of use once more, and then confirm the identity of the snake who's believed to be in Ptolemy's court. This is the earliest sign anyone tied to the death of Khemu is actually tied to the pharaoh, as far as Bayek and Aya are concerned. Now before Bayek heads out, Aya arms him with the hidden blade. She explains it was given to her by Cleopatra, an ancient blade that killed Xerxes, a weapon of justice. This was an assassination that we actually see in Assassin's Creed Odyssey. Armed with the new weapon, Bayek can now go out and hunt, starting with Gennadios. Now, the death of Gennadios is just a small footnote. He's not part of the Order of Ancients, but he did work with them. His death allowed Aya to roam the streets more freely, but it did come at the cost of the Phylakes actively hunting Bayek all over Egypt, just adding more enemies for him to look out for. Once Gennadios is killed, then Bayek is able to go after the real target, the snake. Aya, who was a wealth of knowledge, would point Bayek in the direction of the royal scribe, Eudorus. He is believed to be the snake. Now, in order to confirm this suspicion, Bayek must break into the royal office of the scribe and find anything confirming the belief of him working with the masked ones. It's while making his way through the office of Eudorus, Bayek would find a hidden key that opened up a chest with a false bottom. Inside of the chest, there was a letter meant for the ibis, who, if you remember, was the now deceased Medunamun. The letter was damning to say the least. Within its contents, the snake confirmed the pharaoh is still a compliant puppet of theirs. The killing of the Heron, Rujek, was just a start, as 2 more members have been killed here within Alexandria. The snake warns Medunamun to act with caution in Siwa, while Gennadios continues to question the populace about anything they know. The letters concluded with a stamp of the seal of the snake, and of course this letter being found within the hidden compartment within Eudorus' office, there's no longer any more doubt. Eudorus is the man Bayek is after. He is the snake. Now it's just finding him, which luckily was easy enough. Eudorus was known to frequent a local bathhouse. If he was anywhere, it would be there. Stripped down to nothing more than just a simple towel and the blessing of the hidden blade, Bayek would casually walk into the bathhouse with no problem. Now, since Eudorus was part of the royal court, he did have security. Security that Bayek would simply get past by utilizing a ladder and the rafters above Eudorus's head. Bayek would pounce down upon Eudorus, exhibiting the same level of brutality Mudunumun and Rujek had experienced before. Bayek would initially attempt to drown Eudorus, however, in the struggle, he'd overpower the former Medjay and begin to choke him, at which point Bayek would simply push his hidden blade through Eudorus' throat, slicing his finger off in the process. The accidental severance of Bayek's finger would later become another one of the Brotherhood's initiation rites, sacrificing the exact same ring finger that Bayek had accidentally cut off while killing Eudorus. But now, with the snake and Gennadios taken care of, Bayek would return to Aya, where they celebrate a night together. Justice is served, or so they hoped. Up until this point, there's only been 5 people that Bayek and Aya have been tracking down. As far as they were concerned, they were the only people responsible for the death of Khemu. Gennadios is dead, Aya is free to roam the streets. The snake was somewhat believed to be the last one. It should have been the ultimate celebration for the pair. The first time in a very long time that they can somewhat breathe a sigh of relief, as justice has been served and they are together once more. However, in the early hours of the following morning, Bayek would become doubtful these 5 men were really all responsible for Khemu's death. At first, Aya would reassure her husband that they were, but if Bayek had any more doubts, perhaps it was time to meet with Apollodorus. If anyone knew the answers to the questions Bayek sought after, it would be Apollodorus. So with a kiss farewell, Aya would head out to inform her cousin Phanos Alexandria safer once again, while Bayek heads towards the Hippodrome, hoping to make contact with the man who Aya claims to have all of the answers.
And why should I care about them?
The snake has many heads. Those heads make up the Order.
The snake is the man who killed my son.
It is not so simple.
What are they talking about?
I don't know. They must know something.
The Order of Ancients seeks to control all Egypt. Ptolemy is but their puppet.
Bayek would manage to successfully contact Apollodorus on the outskirts of the Hippodrome. It's a brief exchange between the two, but it clearly outlines where these two men's priorities lie. Bayek is rather impatient. He's demanding a straightforward answer on whether if Eudorus was the last one responsible for the death of Khemu, while Apollodorus is rather elusive on the answer, focusing on helping an injured man get out of his boat and seeking medical attention, thanking him on behalf of Cleopatra. When he does focus on Bayek's questions, he explains it's much more complicated than Bayek can ever really imagine. But if he wanted answers, he must prove himself by way of a small favor. A man working for Apollodorus has been captured by soldiers. Within his possession was a very valuable scroll that must not be discovered. If Bayek can free this man and gain possession of the scroll once more, Apollodorus would give him the answers he seeks. It's nothing but a nuisance for Bayek, who cares little for anything else other than fulfilling the promise he's made in regards to his son's killers. He handles the task effortlessly, freeing Apollodorus' contact and securing the scroll that was cleverly hidden on a ship that the soldiers had just sunk. With the scroll firmly in hand, Bayek would return to an impressed Apollodorus, who is much more talkative than he was before. Content with Bayek's success, Apollodorus would not only enlighten him on the contents of that scroll, but share how he and Aya came to cross paths. You see, the scroll was valuable because within its contents was detailed information on the negotiations between the exiled Queen Cleopatra and the Roman general Pompey. Cleopatra was doing her best to persuade him to ally with her, promising an alliance of marriage should Pompey agree to it. It was a powerful move she hoped to keep secret from her brother, as the negotiations were still in its earliest stages, and she herself was not yet in a position to ascend to the throne here within Egypt. As for Aya, her killing of Actaeon and Ctesios was not only a move in avenging her son, but it was something that served Cleopatra and Apollodorus, as they were actively targeting them as well. When Aya was successful in killing the two of them, and as repercussions, Gennadios started conducting brutal and aggressive house-to-house searches in a desperate attempt to capture Aya, Apollodorus would step in, and as a show of thanks, he orchestrated the safe house for Aya within the city of Alexandria. From where Apollodorus was standing, Aya and Bayek have not only proven themselves individually, but have shown their goals are somewhat aligned by way of mutual enemies. Apollodorus would add, he's taken Bayek to his personal estate to meet with the exiled Cleopatra, who would have the answer to everything Bayek is after. Despite her exile, Cleopatra still demands she be addressed as queen, and as such, Apollodorus would instruct Bayek to kneel before her, not to question her, but only speak in replies, avert her gaze, and to speak true.
Who is this toothsome fellow? In me hoto ek nebshevet.
My queen, this is,
Well?
It is a generous offer, but I've already pledged my life to this woman.
Aya, you have chosen well. Come, we have much to discuss. Celebrate, my friends!
You were meant to kneel.
Moments like this truly emphasize just how much Aya and Bayek can get lost with each other. Even with Cleopatra's presence, Bayek's light-hearted mocking of Apollodorus to amuse Aya completely steals the show. Nonetheless, Cleopatra would indeed inform Bayek and Aya on everything. The snake Bayek is after, the same snake that he presumed to be dead, is not a single person. It's not a man at all. It's the organization known as the Order of Ancients. Eudorus was a member of this order, and he was known as the Hippo. It just happened to be a small mistake in translation on Bayek and Aya's part, who have mistaken the code name of the order for the alias of Eudorus. The quote-unquote snake Bayek is after has multiple heads, multiple people actively working to continue to exert power over Ptolemy and descend on every region of Egypt like a plague. If Aya and Bayek want to truly avenge their son, it'll mean joining forces with Cleopatra and accepting the position of Medjay once more, albeit with a slightly different purpose behind this acceptance. Yes, he would be actively working for the well-being of those oppressed by each member of the order, while strengthening Cleopatra's position here within Egypt, but Bayek's focus of finding the one to plunge the dagger into Khamu's heart would never waver. It would be his ultimate goal, and he knew exactly where to start. Sais. Sais is where Bayek would go out to seek out information on the order member known as the Scarab. He holds cruel power over the entire Nile Delta. Anyone who opposes his rule are either mutilated by way of tongue removal or taken out into the desert and buried up to their neck and left to die. Apollodorus' contact here, a brewer named Harkuf, would add it's much worse than that. The Scarab is considered something of a myth here in Sais, an unspoken terrifying legend that no one dare utter his name out loud. But Harkuf can't deny the terrible position of Sais. Trade is strangled, soldiers run rampant, and Ptolemy's aggressive taxes crush the people. There's only one man that may be of use to Bayek in identifying who the Scarab is, an old man named Gupa. Unfortunately, he hasn't been seen in some time, although his grandson may be helpful in locating where Gupa went off to. The grandson in question here is a small boy named Kowab. Really, the entire story surrounding Kowab, Gupa, and this small family is quite tragic. That'll be elaborated on in just a second, but I want to point out Bayek's interaction between Kowab.
Hey, you tired of winning? I'm looking for your grandfather. Do you know where he went?
No, he left on the road to Camp Pyros. He should have been home by now.
I'll see if I can find him along the road.
Between him and this kid, it's very brief, but it's not the only time that a certain part of Bayek is highlighted, and that's the father within him. Despite Khamu being gone for over a year and him turning quite bitter, angry, and violent towards those responsible for ripping his son away from him, that fatherly instinct never fades. You see it here with Kowab. Earlier in the story, going from Siwa to Alexandria, there's a halfway point where Bayek would relax in a small village known as Yamu, and within the temple of Yamu, there's children that Bayek spends time with, and they affectionately refer to him as Uncle Bayek.
Oh, vanquished by a gang of ruffians, huh? Silent as gifts.
Uncle Bayek! Uncle Bayek! Hello, Uncle.
Jewels of my life, why have you left your mother's side?
Pick me up, Uncle Bayek!
See now, there's no need to attack a man from behind. We're not numbering him 4-1, huh?
You told us to secure every advantage possible over Attainer's foe.
Yes. And I am very dangerous! Hide well, for the wanderer stalks your path!
Later on, there's another little girl named Shadia, who Bayek is not only very good with, but leaves a lasting impression on him. In retrospect, it all feeds the idea of him saying, during the birth of the Brotherhood, that with its creation, he vows to be the father of all children of Egypt, in a way that he wasn't for Khemu the day that he died. And it's almost as if every step of the way, directly or indirectly, their main story quests or side quests, that's not just a one-off statement, it's something that's actually exemplified time and again. Getting back on track, thanks to the information on Gupa by Kawab, Bayek would rescue the old man from a local military camp. Unfortunately, Gupa was a victim of the Scarab's mutilation tactics, and as such, he wasn't able to speak due to his tongue being cut out, but he would still be able to push Bayek in the direction of the city of Latopolis. The Scarab is summoning soldiers there, and as luck would have it, Gupa's son-in-law, Tarhaka, was in Latopolis. He's actively been working on saving the city, and in the last few months, Tarhaka has made a great deal of success in forming connections all over the city. If there's anyone that could be of use in tracking down the Scarab and helping Bayek identify who this man is, it would be Tarhaka. Skipping the finer details, Tarhaka would be a valuable lesson for Bayek in many ways. Hiding in plain sight, the true extent of cruelty from the Order of Ancient members, and the craftiness they may employ. Tarhaka, a public figure within Latopolis, was in fact the Scarab all along. He initially would impress Bayek with a facade of caring and doing all that he could for the well-being of the region and the city that has been swallowed by the desert. They'd bond over their sons and share dreams, a luxury Bayek would admit to Tarhaka that he doesn't even have the luxury of dreaming anymore since his time is completely consumed with finding the Scarab. Tarhaka and Bayek would fight off bandits together. They would even enjoy a moment of peace at a family dinner together, during which Tarhaka would drug Bayek and leave him to die in the desert. And that is how Bayek would learn that Tarhaka was in fact the Scarab. Had it not been for Bayek's trusty horse and of course the intelligence of Senu, he would have definitely died in the desert. However, thanks to the help of his companions, he was able to secure his gear, sneak back into Latopolis, and kill Tarhaka, ending his cruelty once and for all.
Ah! Father! I'll cut you down like you did my father! I thought you were a friend! I hate you!
Sadly, Kawab would witness the death of his father, compelling him to weakly attack Bayek and curse him for taking his idol away from him. But how could a child possibly understand all the suffering his father had caused, including the mutilation of his own grandfather? It's a tragedy that is not an isolated incident, but one that will be repeated time and again moving forward. Following the death of the Scarab, Bayek would next head to the region of Giza. The Order member known as the Hyena has actually somewhat gone rogue here within this region. Initially, the Hyena was in charge of the mining of a precious material known as silica, a vital part in powering the Isu artifacts. The Hyena would eventually come to cut off communication with the rest of the Order members and become obsessed with her own personal mission. Within the tomb of Khufu, the Hyena, whose real name was Khaliset, would become enthralled with the ancient symbols and Isu vaults underneath Khufu's pyramid. She would begin to conduct rituals, sacrificing people within her captivity underneath the temple in a desperate attempt to resurrect her deceased daughter. In some ways, Khaliset almost mirrored Bayek. The grief she has over the death of her daughter would drive her to become obsessed with learning these Isu symbols, leading to this belief that that was the key to bringing her daughter back to life. Her death was only a temporary state of being. During his confrontation with her, Bayek would be very sympathetic with her loss. I mean, they were practically in the same boat, albeit Bayek's grief would drive him to a path of blood and vengeance. Khaliset, on the other hand, would be pure obsession and depression over the loss of her kid. Bayek would do his best to get her to understand he knows her pain, but you cannot bring your children back. Not like this. It's through her defiance to Bayek's reason that would be the reason for her death at his hands. and with it came the failure of her protecting her daughter both in life and in death. A stark reminder of Bayek's own fear of failure in helping Hemu reach the field of reeds. In terms of the death of all of the Order members, anger and hatred would drive Bayek's actions with pretty much little to no remorse whatsoever. And there would be a brief moment with Bayek feeling the same towards Khaliset, but it gives way to a small glimpse of introspection within him. Perhaps not all of these members are horrible people after all. Yes, they do horrible things, or at the very least are accepting of horrible things. Can you blame them for their misguidance though? Their drive to redeem themselves or their loved ones? Obsessions that aren't all too different from his or his wife's. Khaliset performed ritual sacrifices on innocent people for her own purpose. That was horrible enough, but she was not the dedicated member as other masked ones were. And in truth, was her desperate attempt to bring back her daughter any different in morality from Bayek and Aya's aggressive killings towards their perceived enemies?
I wanted to protect my daughter in life and death. I have done neither. Osiris! Please grant me reunion. She walks alone in the field of reeds. Am I to remain in the Duat forever? I just want my daughter back! Please!
Khaliset's death would lift the cloud of death and ritual sacrifice from Giza, freeing Bayek to look towards the city of Memphis next. Memphis's problems was far beyond just the oppression of the people, and it wasn't so black and white as it was in other parts of the country. The city itself was a center of religious significance. The Order member known as the Lizard was working dutifully here to force a powerful curse on the city to reflect the god's disapproval of Cleopatra's ascension to the throne. Pascherempta, the high priest of the city and close ally of Apollodorus and Cleopatra, would inform Bayek just how deep this curse infects the city and its inhabitants. Disease, pestilence, the perpetual stench of death in the air. Pascherempta's wife has miscarried 3 times this year already, and now the Apis bull is terribly sick. The gods truly have forsaken this land and all who choose to stay. You can only imagine just how bleak of a situation like this may have seemed. In an effort to make some kind of understanding of it all, Bayek would go to visit a local seer. During his visit, he'd drink some kind of concoction that would induce a drug-fueled hallucination. During this hallucination, armed with a glowing bow and arrows, Bayek would best the god of the Maat, claiming his heart back, and with it, he was granted access to the field of reeds where Hemu was waiting for him. Without saying a single word, Bayek would drop to his knees, and all at seeing his son once again. Hemu would whisper into his father's ear, he'd smile, and he would awake from his dream. Once awake, the seer would explain he and Pascherempta's wife share a common enemy. She had been poisoned by the person Bayek is after, the Lizard. The seer instructs to refuse the temple food since that appears to be the method of poisoning and could be Bayek's first clue. As Bayek heads out towards the temple, Aya is just outside of the building waiting. Now she would almost immediately pick up on a look in Bayek's eyes, his vision of Hemu still fresh in his mind. At first, he wouldn't share much about his vision, just the seer instructed him to return to the temple and focus on the food supply there. Aya would suggest that they travel back together, and it's during this brief period Bayek would open up to Aya about missing her. He wants her to return to his side. Without Hemu, all they have is each other. If they have to continue to fight the Order, why not do it side by side? He still loves her. Aya, on the other hand, holds firm in her dedication to Cleopatra. She would explain, while she would never stop mourning what the both of them had lost, Cleopatra lifts her gaze to the horizon. Cleopatra has a mission and a purpose far greater than any of them, and Aya is dedicated to that duty. They really should just enjoy their time together. No one should live the loss that she has lived through, and that drives her. Perhaps one day they can settle down together, but that is a distant pipe dream. As the parents of the temple, they spread out, gathering as much information as they could on the suspected poisoning. Aya would speak to the priestesses while Bayek takes the god's enclosure. As it turns out, just like Pasherenptah's wife, the sickness taking hold of the Apis bull was also due to an intentional poisoning. The Apis bull was actually being fed peach pits by the priestesses. When the priestesses were confronted by Aya and Bayek, they would reveal they were forced to poison the god. Bandits have kidnapped their brother, sent them his severed finger, and told them that if they did not poison the Apis bull on their behalf, they would feed their brother to the crocodiles. Fearful of their life, Aya would opt to stay behind and keep them safe, while Bayek would go out and save their brother, who, upon his rescue, would have so much more valuable information. After rescuing their brother, he would share, the lizard is indeed responsible for everything going on here within Memphis, the poisoning of the Apis bull, the poisoning of Pasherenptah's wife, the pestilence, the disease, the perpetual stench of death. It's all the doing of the lizard, who is not only a high priest, but is actually within Pasherenptah's inner circle. While no one can make any type of confirmation on the true identity of the lizard, there's two notable identifiers of the lizard, and that is a bright blue scarf that he wears and a very sickly cough. If Bayek can find the priest that matches those two identifying markers, that is the lizard that he's after. Kill the man with the nasty cough and blue scarf, and Memphis is free of this man-made curse. Another priest shall die by Bayek's hands, but if there was any doubts, reluctance, or sadness at that thought, his wife Aya would quickly put it aside, saying the lives of 1,000 priests are worth the security of Egypt. With the discovery of this new information, Bayek and Aya would await the arrival of Cleopatra the following day as she was set to give a speech. The speech was designed to reassure the people of the city she, their goddess, hears their plight and is here to bring salvation, which in a way she did, as her Medjays were actively working behind the scenes, learning the true source of the city's agony. When she and Pasherenptah hear of the description of the lizard, Cleopatra would greenlight the lizard's assassination, while Pasherenptah shares the man's real name, Hetepi, one of his closest advisors. It's a discovery that stirs many questions amongst Pasherenptah and Cleopatra's allies, but in the meantime, Bayek must first silence the lizard once and for all. Now, fortunately for Bayek, all of the priests of Anubis are currently at the temple performing rites. It's just a matter of confirming his target by way of the persistent cough and blue scarf. Just as the many targets before, the ailed Hetepi was little to no threat to Bayek whatsoever. As confirmation of Hetepi's death, Bayek would take his mask of Anubis and smash it in front of Cleopatra, exclaiming the city of Memphis is hers once again. The curses are lifted and the people are now free. As a token of appreciation and acknowledgement of their alliance, Cleopatra would not only condemn Hetepi and command that his soul be feasted on by demons, but summons a similar fate waiting for the people responsible for the death of Khemu.
May demons feast on Hetepi's car. And may those guilty of Khemu's death soon follow.
Success in Memphis has been achieved, but the silence of Bayek and Aya is profound. They shall not rest or properly celebrate until Khemu is adequately avenged. Hetepi's death would be celebrated with a grand ceremony across Memphis by Cleopatra and her patrons. Even Bayek for a brief moment is wrapped up in the festivities, but he's then quickly reminded of the grim reality he lives in. As Aya has said before, she's dedicated now more than ever to her work with Cleopatra. With Memphis secured and the lizard dead, all work within the city has been concluded, and now her duty is set to take her north. In the brightest moments, there's sadness between the two of them. Even though she does not want to leave, there's a purpose that she must see through. The time Bayek and Aya spend together in Memphis, I think, does the best at showing just how much the two of them really support each other. Their initial reunion in Alexandria did a great job at displaying the depth of their love. The quick moment at Apollodorus' estate would show the smaller, more lighthearted moments shared between the two of them, while Memphis displays wherever Aya goes, Bayek is determined to follow. Where his or her conviction appears to waver in the slightest, the other lifts their spirits and reminds them they're not alone. They share their pain and loss, but there's a greater purpose here. It's not yet completely apparent to them, but their purpose would begin to show much later. Bayek would continue to want his wife by his side as she was before, while Aya rejected that life out of the pain she experienced in the loss of Khemu, determined to actively work against the evil hidden forces in this world. After this last night together, Aya would head north to contact the Roman general Pompey on behalf of Cleopatra, while Bayek would head south to the region of Fayum. Fayum, as Apollodorus described it to Bayek and Aya, was the most oppressed region in all of Egypt. Siwa was the beginning of the Order's darkness. Thanks to Bayek's efforts, Siwa's people can now smile towards the sun in joy once more, but Fayum is stuck in a perpetual darkness. The region is under the heel of the one known as the Crocodile. Unlike other regions where Bayek was almost immediately able to make some kind of contact with Apollodorus' contacts, Fayum was quite different. Hotefres was the name of the informant here in Fayum. He ran a bureau out of a local village that Bayek discovered to be completely ransacked when he arrived in the region. Upon investigating, Bayek would learn the crocodiles set their sights on Hotefres, and in an effort to capture Hotefres, one of his servants was arrested on trumped-up charges, and so, to prepare for a fight, Hotefres has retreated to some kind of defensive position. The question was, where? The only way to discover this answer was to free the imprisoned servant in hope he would be of some kind of use to Bayek. After breaking him out of a local military camp, the servant would inform Bayek Hotefres has commandeered a trader's ship headed to Lake Moeris. Bayek could find it by a large statue, although he warns Bayek that Hotefres would be on the ship prepared for a fight since the crocodile has hired mercenaries to find him. Anyone who's completely unfamiliar to him is fair game, so Bayek must approach the ship with caution. After boarding the ship, Hotefres was able to immediately identify Bayek as a Medjay. But it wasn't until Bayek presented the golden Medjay badge provided by Cleopatra that Hotefres relented, accepting he was indeed an ally. Now with reinforcements in the form of this lonely Medjay, Hotefres would enlighten Bayek on the situation of Fayum. According to Hotefres, the crocodile has been aggressively hunting him because he had stolen a very valuable ledger from a Greek magistrate he suspected of corruption. The ledger itself shouldn't just be able to reveal the identity of the crocodile, but if they can get it to Apollodorus, they should be able to bring down the entire organization. The crocodile knows this, and so has been hunting Hotefres under the assumption that the stolen ledger is personally on him. In reality, he's left it hidden with his wife Henut. As long as the Order believes Hotefres has the ledger and he continues to be on the move, his family should be safe. Now that Bayek is here and seeking to help bring down the crocodile, he could go and retrieve the ledger while Hotefres keeps them focused on him. Hotefres would give Bayek a doll for his daughter Shadia and instruct him that when he arrives in the village of his home to provide his wife Henut with the doll to let her know Bayek is a friend to be trusted. Now I've mentioned Shadia's name earlier as one of the children that leaves one of the biggest impacts on Bayek. Truthfully, her time with Bayek is almost as short as his time with Kawab or the children from Yamu, but there's so much personality given to her in such a brief amount of time. She names her doll in front of Bayek, she plays with him a little bit, begins to refer to him affectionately as Uncle Bayek just as all the other children have, and would even be his guide to Hotefres' home where the ledger was supposed to be hidden, and she was joking with Bayek all the way. Sadly, her death is just as sudden and moving as her carefree spirit was. As it turns out, the ledger Hotefres had hidden at his villa wasn't there at all. His little girl Shadia had taken it, and it was on her, and Bayek had sent her back to her mother completely unaware of this. And that normally wouldn't be that much of a problem, but her mother was summoned by soldiers for a quote-unquote routine investigation. He could have potentially sent her to her death. Bayek would hurry back to the lighthouse in a panic, but unfortunately it was just too late. Henut was on her knees crying uncontrollably. Shadia was killed by drowning. Another child has fallen victim to the cruelty of the Order. Bayek would retrieve Shadia's body out of the water, and while Henut caressed her body, Bayek and Hotefres would exchange a few words. Hotefres was very much in a similar position to Bayek over a year ago. With the death of Shadia, he lost everything. The ledger was completely destroyed as well. He was back at square one with a painful message delivered by way of his daughter being killed. And because Henut and Shadia were called to such an isolated location at the lighthouse, there was no witnesses besides Henut herself. And the only thing they can go off of is that Henut mentioned there was men and soldiers accompanying the crocodile. One of these men was large in stature and red-haired. It's not entirely much to go off of, but Hotefres would share that the Crocodilopolis was a gladiator arena that was located here in the region of Fayum. Perhaps Bayek could look there. At this point forward, Bayek's drive for bringing down the crocodile was almost entirely out of revenge for Shadia. He became obsessed with finding this red-haired man seen with the crocodile during Shadia's drowning. And he would quickly learn this red-haired man was one of the Gallic brothers, vicious and cruel gladiators that were the champions of the arena. The only way Bayek could hope to gain entry into the arena, given the opportunity to face off the Gallic brothers, and with that learning the answers that he's truly after, the most important of which being the real identity of the crocodile, was by way of being sponsored. Now it seemed the winds of fate were apparently in his favor, as there was a woman who hailed from Siwa that was well known in the arena. If she would sponsor him, then he would be allowed a chance to fight the Gallic brothers and learn everything he was after. Now the Siwa warrior in question was a longtime friend of Bayek named Kensa.
Bayek? My friend! My brother! Oh!
It's been quite some time since they last seen each other. Bayek has long since renounced his position as Medjay of Siwa, while Kensa has fully embraced the life of a gladiator. And because of that, Bayek would never fully trust Kensa. While they met on good terms, Bayek would never fully reveal the reason why he was in Fayum, or why he wanted to enter the Crocodilopolis. And the reason for that was, while moving through the local village and fighting through the arena, he would learn the crocodile would use gladiators from the arena as hired muscle. Gain favor with the crocodile and you'll be loved and rewarded both inside and outside of the arena. It was clear Kensa wanted such favors, so out of fear of betrayal or losing this prime opportunity, Bayek would just tell her he sought the life of fame and glory one could expect as being a gladiator. The pair would enter the arena as the Guardians of Siwa, and as you'd expect, they damn nearly demolished everyone before them. Kensa was a ferocious warrior just as Bayek was, so they would face the Gallic brothers in no time. Now despite the success they had in the arena, no one could have predicted the strength and ferocity Bayek would unleash when finally facing the Gallic brothers. Before entering the fight, the director of the arena even instructed the Gallic brothers and the Guardians of Siwa to not kill each other. Normally, that's how one would achieve victory, but in this case, both the Gallic brothers and Guardians of Siwa was earning the arena way too much money. Really, that small detail isn't important beyond it adding to the shock of the entire arena at Bayek's ability to not only knock both brothers onto their backs, while Kensa was basking in the glory of the crowd, but doing it in such an aggressive way that they had no choice but to beg for their lives.
You killed the child called Shadia! That is the least you deserve!
The lighthouse! We didn't kill her, I swear!
We have done many terrible things, Siwan, but the murder of the child is not one of them!
All hail the new champions!
We were
the
there!
Guardians of Siwa!
Captured the girl and take her to Berenike, to the crocodile! It was she who drowned the child, took a book from her, ordered a stone tied to her ankles, and pushed her in the water. There was nothing we could do!
And so with a plea for mercy, the crocodile's identity is revealed, along with the way Shadia was killed. Bayek's very public interrogation would alert Berenike to his intentions of killing her. In response to this, she would retreat to her estate, the largest granary in all of Egypt, and she would hire improved security, Bayek's former friend and partner Kensa. In the grand scheme of things, it doesn't make all that much of a difference, but it does go to show just another slimy move the Order members would not shy away from in order to protect themselves and their interests. None of it really made that much of a difference, though, as under the cover of darkness, Bayek would sneak into the granary and confront Berenike. During their exchange of words, Berenike would reveal she not only did not remember who Shadia was, but all of the family she's destroyed throughout her life mattered little. There was no remorse whatsoever. She was doing what was best for Egypt. Bayek, on the other hand, would promise to destroy everything she's ever built, and the last thing she would ever remember on her way to the afterlife is the name Shadia. He may not have beaten her violently to death, but the sentiments Berenike shared had to have put her in a position very similar to Medunamun, a woman and a man who cared little for the life of a child as long as their goals were met.
I'm still looking for the men who killed my son. The Order is neutralized. Was my hunt for me or for you?
I have 2 more names. The Order can't be.
And how many more names after that?
As many as it takes.
I wish to bring my son to the afterlife where he belongs, not... I like you, Cleopatra, but the royal matters that seduced my wife do not sway me so.
Berenike was the last of the main targets. Bayek would head towards the city of Heraklion to speak with Cleopatra at her palace, and he would arrive in much different spirits than before. It's very evident his patience has run thin. As he put it, he's taken care of all these targets for her and freed much of Egypt in her interest, but he's not any closer to the killers behind Khemu's death. Cleopatra would attempt to bring up the importance of the badge of a Medjay, while Bayek admits he cares little for the badge. It evokes no grand emotions in him as it does for Aya. It is simply a key to help him get what he wants. And what he wants is to free his son from the afterlife. Cleopatra would assure him they are very close. She's uncovered 2 more names that are close in her brother's inner circle. Along with this, she shares Aya's on her way with the Roman general Pompey close behind, and now thanks to Bayek's efforts all across Egypt, the order is panicking. She has discovered that there is going to be an assassination attempt on her life. And it just so happens an informant with intimate knowledge on the assassination attempt and the killers behind Khemu's death is right here for Bayek to accept as a little present.
He's in the Order of Ancients, like Septimius. We found him snooping around the villa. We think he knows who killed your son.
My brother Septimius killed your son, and I don't give a shit!
Shit giving is my job.
I just fucked those twins up, Venator!
Septimius. It's a name Bayek is hearing for the first time and is clearly not Egyptian. He is a Roman Gamignani commanding a militia of 2,000 men strong. Cleopatra admitted that at one point she actually intended to ally herself with him, but after Aya shared her suspicions of him working with the Order, Cleopatra refrained. This informant was the confirmation she needed in knowing truly if Septimius was part of the Order or not. Not just that, Septimius was the one who allegedly killed Khemu and is orchestrating the plot for Cleopatra's death, which was intended to be carried out by Septimius' subordinate Venator. To thwart this plot, Bayek must first head to a local brothel to see what kind of information he can uncover on this assassination attempt. After interrogating the twins, Bayek would discover the plot to kill Cleopatra was actually closer than they originally thought it was. It was somewhat an elaborate plan as well. One of Venator's men, posing as a woman, would infiltrate the palace. Other men pretending to be wine merchants would dock and set a fire to cause panic, and an archer positioned in an elevated location was set to pick off Cleopatra in the panic. Thanks to the help of Sinu, Bayek would locate and kill all of the assassins, with the final target being Venator himself, who would arrive in person at Cleopatra's palace. Despite the attempt being a complete failure, the bloodbath that brought to Cleopatra's doorstep meant civil war was closer than ever before. This would just compel Cleopatra to go to her last resort, meeting with the Roman general Pompey. Egypt was on the brink of civil war, and in her current position she could not hope to win. Ptolemy knew this. Pompey truly was her only option, and if Septimius got to him before they did, their only chance of taking over Egypt may be lost with him. As Cleopatra and Apollodorus head for the island Pompey was meant to land his ship at, Bayek and Aya would travel together. It's but a quiet moment before the storm. Civil war loomed on the horizon and they knew it. While they discussed Aya's progress on her journey to meet with Pompey, or how after all of this they would parade Cleopatra in the streets of Siwa, showing their people what they have accomplished, ushering in a new era for Egypt. Bayek would remind Aya, while her duty as protector of Egypt is an admirable title, he shares her hatred for Ptolemy, and she must realize that even though they're fighting by Cleopatra's side, in the grand scheme of things, they work alone. Cleopatra is a Ptolemy. She just so happens to be the better of two evils at the moment. It's a warning the two of them would come to acknowledge a little too late, but for now they can't even give it much thought, as at the moment they would discover General Pompey was indeed killed.
Septimius has beat us.
Funny how all great men are reduced to food for maggots. This is a cemetery for our ambitions.
No. No, it can't be.
Pompey's death would compel Cleopatra to reach out to the next Roman general in line, Caesar. Caesar has already made his way to the city of Alexandria. The city itself is in high alert and is a much different place than it was the last time Bayek and Aya was here. As if their presence wasn't bad enough, Cleopatra was someone who was instantly recognizable. Nationally speaking, her brother Ptolemy was still recognized as the official pharaoh of Egypt. Guards serving Ptolemy and Caesar would attack the exiled queen on sight undoubtedly. Unless she's able to somehow gain an audience with Caesar, her appearance in Alexandria would be considered suicide. It would require some craftiness on her part, which was achieved by Apollodorus. After fighting through a heavy naval blockade, Apollodorus, Cleopatra, Aya, and Bayek would arrive at the docks of Alexandria, at which point Apollodorus would decide to wrap Cleopatra in a carpet, keeping her well hidden. Well, Apollodorus himself would identify as the governor of Heliopolis, and Bayek and Aya are his Phylakitai. The three of them come to the palace bearing gifts that are from the local merchants intended for Caesar, as a show of goodwill from the people. This explanation was good enough as far as the guards were concerned, and so they were all let through, escorted straight to the throne room, where Caesar and Ptolemy were in the middle of negotiating some kind of alliance over the severed head of General Pompey. Upon Cleopatra's reveal, Caesar's interest in Ptolemy's offered alliance would disintegrate, as Cleopatra offered what her brother cannot: marriage. Caesar was enchanted by her. However, Ptolemy would not stand for this. He would vow that if Caesar allied with Cleopatra, he would order every Roman soldier in Alexandria be slaughtered, a warning that he would surely act on in the coming days. As for Bayek and Aya, it would be somewhat sidelined for a moment. Bayek would share his disappointment in Septimius and Pothinus escaping. They were known as the Jackal and Scorpion within the order, and they've successfully gotten away with all the attention focused on Cleopatra. His echoed warning to Aya just a day ago that Cleopatra is nothing but another Ptolemy and cannot be trusted reverbed deep within. But Apollodorus would assure him, give the queen enough time to settle into her new position, and the men Bayek is after would soon follow. Unfortunately for these grieving parents, Cleopatra would soon show that she would become too focused on winning Caesar over to keep her promises to her former Medjay. The day after meeting Caesar, Cleopatra would call upon Aya to find a way to gain access to Alexander the Great's tomb that was under the city. No one's been able to gain access to it, and so she put this task up to her most trusted Medjay, Aya. Now it's important to point out Alexander the Great's tomb was but another location the Order of Ancients was after. His scepter that he was buried with was an Isu artifact that powered the Apple of Eden, the very same artifact Bayek was presented with in front of the vault back in Siwa during the time of Khemu's death, the same artifact that he had beaten Medunamun to death with. The bigger picture was still unknown to both Bayek and Aya at the time, despite Bayek even pointing out a description at the bottom of Alexander's sarcophagus mentioning Siwa, the vault under Siwa, the scepter Alexander holds, and a marked orb. This would cause him to question Aya what happened to the orb that he beat Medunamun with, in which Aya would comfortably respond with by saying she gave it to Apollodorus, as he has a fascination with collecting great artifacts such as that. In this small moment, loyalties along with the shift of power would begin to turn the Medjay's mission in a different direction. But before they could even realize it, Ptolemy's threat of slaughtering every Roman soldier in Alexandria appeared as if it was beginning to commence.
My Caesar, our emissaries have been captured at the southern garrison of Alexandria. Soldiers have reported a hostile environment.
Flavius, the most trusted soldier of Caesar's, would run in a panic inside of Alexander's tomb, warning him and Cleopatra that Roman emissaries had been seized at the gates to the city. Roman soldiers that witnessed the emissaries being taken described the entire scene as hostile. Alexander was fully prepared to send Roman soldiers to go and retrieve their emissaries back, but Cleopatra would suggest something different. She would send Aya and Bayek to go and free these emissaries in order to avoid full-on war raging here within the streets of Alexandria. Bayek would serve as a distraction at the gates of the garrison while Aya snuck in undetected to locate the imprisoned emissaries and escape with them. The plan itself went perfectly fine. Bayek did well in distracting all of the soldiers by initiating a brawl, and Aya was more than capable of pinpointing where these emissaries were. Beaten and bloodied as they were in a well enough state to inform Aya that they must quickly alert Caesar to Septimius' plans. Septimius and Pothinus were behind the capture of the Roman emissaries. Septimius was violently interrogating the emissaries on information of Caesar when Pothinus entered the room saying a man referred to as the Lion has altered their plans. He calls that they march on the pharaohs now, and they trap the queen inside the palace. The way they planned on doing so was through launching a siege on the harbor of Alexandria, while simultaneously flooding the streets with soldiers headed for the palace. Before Aya can get any valuable information on where Septimius or Pothinus went, the emissary would lose consciousness. So now was a race for time. Aya would manage to get to the palace before any meaningful action was taken against Cleopatra or Caesar by Septimius or Pothinus. Now, the information Aya shared on Septimius' plan was greeted by Caesar with preparing for war. As he put it, if they planned on launching a siege here within the harbor, then the harbor shall be engulfed in flame. Caesar had actually already set a plan ahead of time. Should things go south here within Egypt, all he would have to do was change the pharaoh's light at the lighthouse, signaling to the rest of his fleet on the situation here within Alexandria. With the fleet aware of what was going on, then they can properly deal with whatever Septimius and Pothinus had planned. There was just a question of how this was all meant to unfold. Now, the original plan was Cleopatra would defiantly remain on her throne, determined to die as a queen, sitting where she belonged with Apollodorus loyally by her side, while Caesar and Aya were meant to take a chariot to meet with Caesar's fleet after Bayek would change the brazier at the lighthouse, giving everyone the signal to move. Before everyone set out to execute their task, Cleopatra would also have one final request to Aya.
Aya, if you find my brother, Dinestoy.
Now, even though Caesar tasked Bayek with changing the brazier, out of love and dedication to his wife, Bayek would actually swap roles with Aya. Aside from it being a blatant display of his own commitment to his wife Aya, achieving this on her own out of her own request, I think was a peak moment within the story, not just in Aya's own determination and of course Bayek's commitment to her, as I just said, but her mentality, her defiance. The fact that she was just willing to do it just to prove a point speaks volumes, and it puts on display just how strong of a character she truly had alongside Bayek. Remember, Bayek and Aya were co-founders of the Hidden Ones here within Egypt. It wasn't strictly just a Bayek endeavor. Aya's skill and determination is a testimony of her strong character and Bayek's rigorous, Medjay-inspired training. While she did take slightly longer than Caesar had hoped, Aya would achieve altering the brazier light, plummeting the Nile Delta into vicious fighting for the next 3 days. Roman and Egyptian blood would soak deep into Egyptian soil. While the fighting was certainly ferocious, Caesar's numbers along with the skill of Cleopatra's Medjay would undoubtedly turn the table. It was on the 3rd day of this intense power struggle over the soul of Egypt that Caesar would finally share that his scouts have made some headway and have informed him that Pothinus is heading the charge against the Romans. If Caesar and Aya can keep the soldiers busy, then Bayek can possibly take care of their leader, dealing with Pothinus once and for all. Not only effectively killing off the last of what remained of Ptolemy's royal court, but bringing Aya and Bayek one step closer to finally bringing their son's killers to justice. The lone Medjay would head towards the last known location of Pothinus, while Aya would head in a totally different direction, picking up the faint scent of Cleopatra's traitorous kin. Now, Bayek would find Pothinus riding a war elephant. It was a grand battle to say the least. One Bayek would turn out to be victorious in. Strangely enough, after killing the elephant, Bayek would finally speak to Pothinus, the man known as a Scorpion. And out of all of the Order members, Pothinus was really the only one to apologize to Bayek. He would share he knew that all of them had crossed the line that day in Siwa over a year ago. All he wanted was the best for Egypt, and with every good rule, some sacrifices must be made. It's a mentality that's not completely different from other Order members such as Berenike or Tarhaka, sacrificing the many for the perceived greater good. Just as he's done so many times before, Egypt's last Medjay would send one more target to the Duat. All that remained was Khemu's killer, the Jackal Septimius. Almost immediately, as he was finishing up with Pothinus, Caesar would catch up and inform Bayek on the situation all across Egypt. Septimius, fortunately, has been identified and located. He's not too far off and is believed to be alone in an abandoned village. Caesar will continue to distract his men to make sure it stays that way, and Bayek can deal with him one-on-one. Aya, on the other hand, is on Ptolemy's scent, and the pharaoh will be dealt with officially once and for all. Everything was seeming to finally come to a close. 1 year of anger, torment, rage, lack of sleep, and constant hunting seemed to finally be over. The only thing was, Caesar would ask Bayek to capture Septimius alive. He did not want Bayek to kill him. Unlike Pautunus or all the other Order members before, all of them were Egyptian. Septimius, on the other hand, is Roman. Caesar wants Septimius to be tried by the Romans under their laws after they discover what his plans were and why he was holding a rebellion here in Egypt, using Ptolemy as his puppet. It was a modest enough of a request. Caesar and his men were allies of Aya and Bayek after all, and they were all hunting the same prey. All he had to do was just refrain from killing the man. Septimius would see justice all the same. Bayek would just have to surrender the pleasure of putting the knife into his son's killer, as he had imagined doing so every night since the day they took Hemuk from him. Now initially Bayek would ignore the request altogether, not really paying attention to it or at least acknowledging it. Focused more intently than ever on finally putting an end to this wicked nightmare and releasing his son into the afterlife, Bayek was more determined to make sure Septimius just didn't get away yet again. And once he finally came face to face with Septimius, well, that was a different matter altogether. Septimius himself was insufferable, taunting Bayek the whole time they fought, mentioning how Bayek failed to protect his son and how Septimius remembered what it was like the day Hamu died, taunting Bayek every way that he could fathom doing so. Despite the Roman completely dwarfing Bayek in physical appearance, just as all his Order brethren before, he would fall to Bayek. And just as Medunamun, Eudorus, and Berenike, Septimius would feel Bayek's wrath. He would throw blow after blow at the man who has been officially identified as the source of all of his pain. It's an absolute torrent of emotions.
He killed my son!
Bayek's unruly nature and strong aggression towards his Roman allies would result in him being knocked unconscious and left in the dirt just as he was in the vaults of Siwa. Just as back then when he awakes, his reality would be drastically different. The Egypt that he once knew, the Egypt that he believed he was fighting for, would all be changed. Betrayed by former allies, he'd find a purpose greater than just demanding blood for blood. A new man, a new warrior, a new protector. The birth of the Brotherhood known as the Hidden Ones, brought together by the creed, values, and beliefs of those who fought to put Cleopatra on the throne. A grave mistake that they'd quickly realize, and through this Brotherhood's inception, would fight to correct that mistake.
Only I can lead Egypt into a new era of prosperity!
Ptolemy's death, Bayek's anger, and Cleopatra's ambitions all led to Aya and Bayek getting screwed, almost directly inspiring the birth of the Brotherhood. 2 weeks following the death of Ptolemy and Bayek's outburst, Cleopatra has officially ascended the throne of Egypt. She would hold a speech in the center of Alexandria, where she now proudly wielded Alexander the Great's scepter as a symbol of the new era about to befall her Egypt. She also had a new ally by her side, Septimius. As if that wasn't bad enough, Bayek and Aya were both banned from the palace as well, their allegiance rewarded with being branded as outcasts. And just a few pieces of gold Cleopatra has rewarded to Aya as thanks for her service for the last 5 years. Apollodorus would end up being their only remaining ally to some extent. He was still loyal to the queen, but he did inform his former accomplices that matters were much more complicated than they appeared to be. Ptolemy's death was blamed on Bayek by Caesar, and since Ptolemy was considered a divine being, a god, that didn't exactly help their case. Aya would angrily interject, exclaiming she made her pact with Cleopatra. To hell with whatever Caesar believed. Apollodorus would just beg the pair to wait, let him do what he could to help. However, the pair weren't happy with their former ally's betrayal. They would just promise to Apollodorus that they would do anything in their power to kill Septimius. And with that, Aya would brand her friend a traitor, and the pair would retire to a local hideout where what remained of little allies they had were convening. Pascherempta, Phoxidus, and a few others angrily bickered about their hand in helping what is essentially a stronger evil, cast aside just as Aya and Bayek were. As they argued and their disappointment grew, Bayek appeared to finally give way. He would begin to grab everyone's attention, calling on everyone in the room to not fall into the same mistake that he had for the last year. When his son was killed, he lashed out. He gave in to his anger, and his anger made them stronger. Their combined efforts put Cleopatra on the throne, and that was a mistake, but that at least brought everyone in the room here together. Their enemies hide behind crowns, working in the shadows of kings and queens. But who are the ones working in the shadows for the people? Their creed, their values, that's what unifies them. There's no use for the crown. Their brotherhood, no matter how small, requires no validation.
And I promise that for all the songs of Egypt, I will be the father I was not that day in Siwa. To the Brotherhood.
The Brotherhood!
Bayek's promise was the first time he had ever made such a commitment. Something more than just demanding blood for blood out of revenge for his son. For the first time, he acknowledged something greater, some good, some hope for everyone out of the biggest tragedy that he had ever suffered. Even during the moments where it seemed as if someone was finally touching the more human side of him, the most prominent of which, back when you first met Tarhaka, and they were talking about dreams and Tarhaka's plans for his son and how Bayek just put his head down and said he doesn't really have the luxury of dreaming anymore. He was driven strictly on the mission of finding whoever was responsible for his son, and he didn't really care about anything else that either was in his way or that was affected by his actions of going after people that he deemed responsible for his loss. The acknowledgement of the destruction of his anger and the mistake that he even made that day that he lost Khemu was major. It's an acknowledgement that got through to Aya, who for the first time finally admitted having mistrusted Cleopatra. It's a mistake she now must correct. Starting with why Septimius and Caesar's second-in-command, Flavius, took Alexander's staff. The two of them had too much interest in Alexander's tomb, and Bayek and Aya need to know why. Doing so would end up unveiling just how complicated everything truly was, just as Apollodorus had warned them. The pair would begin by heading to Alexander's tomb. When they arrived, they were greeted with a major surprise. Apollodorus was in the middle of fighting Roman legionaries, to which Bayek and Aya would instinctively spring into action to rescue their former ally, albeit a little too late. Bleeding from a fatal wound, Apollodorus would begin by apologizing to Bayek. He was wrong. Flavius was the man that had actually killed Khemu. He is the lion, and he's been in charge of everything. He was behind everything going on here in Egypt. He and Septimius had attacked Apollodorus, robbed him of the orb Aya had given him for safekeeping some time ago, and now the pair are on their way back to Siwa. Bayek's people are in danger. With Apollodorus' final breath, he demands the former Medjay go and save them.
Bayek, Aya, your people are in danger. Go now!
Now, by the time Aya and Bayek arrived in Siwa, it was worse than even the days of Medunamun, back when he was utilizing the local garrison of soldiers to oppress the people. People here at that time were afraid, and they were met with entire neighborhoods being razed to the ground if they were even falsely believed to be lying about information the soldiers demanded. But now, there loomed a heavy sickness in the air. The stench of death permeated through the air. People were sick, animals were dying, signs of a plague like never before were seen all around the village. Roman soldiers stood guard all over the Temple of Amun, attracting Aya and Bayek's attention, believing the source of all of this had to do with the vault that Bayek was demanded to open up so long ago. As they made their way towards the vault, the temple itself was heavily guarded, but the vault, on the other hand, was completely unsecure. It even opened up for the pair unexpectedly, scaring off what remained of the Romans. Determined to find out what happened, both Aya and Bayek would descend into the vault. Now, Bayek described entering the vault as entering the Duat. Being so close to the gods, immortals should never experience such a phenomenon. As Aya became enthralled about the symbols and excited at the thought of learning the story of mankind, Bayek would go silent, absent.
Here's the story of mankind. Bayek.
It is Hepzibah. My Sammy. Your life is done here in the desert dust. They took my closest friend.
We must rush to stop Flavius.
No! We cannot leave him here! He deserves a proper farewell.
Hepzibah, Bayek's closest friend, the man he trusted as Siwa's Medjay while he was hunting those responsible for Hemu's death, is now dead by the same people that took Hemu. The voice acting of Bayek over Hepzibah's body is phenomenal. The sadness he experiences is so genuine. You can feel his pain and sorrow. The pain and sorrow from losing Hemu undoubtedly reverberated here within the walls that now witnessed the death of his best friend. Hepzibah was a final tragedy. Flavius and Septimius would take no more of his treasured loved ones. Interestingly, what I've always perceived as Aya and Bayek somewhat flipping roles here, Bayek would outright reject Aya's demand to go after Flavius immediately, opting instead to give his friend the proper burial rites. Aya is determined for her revenge, while Bayek puts a bigger emphasis on paying homage to his friend, making sure he's granted safe passage into the afterlife. Despite Bayek's rage this entire time for the last year or so that he felt towards the Order, really at the heart of it all, he just wanted the same for his son Hemu, to be granted into the afterlife. Emotions aren't always so black and white, especially when dealing with love and grief. Just because he was angry doesn't mean that there wasn't pain, or the occasional attempt to put off the more unbearable thoughts and memories in the background and hold off proper grief until after the seemingly more important objective was achieved, which in this case was killing those responsible. But with powerful emotions often manifesting through anger, and with Bayek trained from such an early age to be a protector and utilizing those skills of tracking down and defeating enemies that are more numerous, resourceful, bigger, and stronger than you, it's easy to forget that he is a vulnerable person that's hurting. The loss of Hepzibah betrays another deep sense of that vulnerability, the complexity of Bayek as a person, as a character. As he ascends from the depths of the vault with his friend's body in his arms, Rabia and what remained of the villagers within Siwa are gathered outside the vault's entrance. They would greet their beloved Medjay with the horror of what befell their village once Septimius and Flavius opened up the vault, and how Hepzibah bravely did his best to stop them as acting Medjay of Siwa. Unfortunately, Hepzibah was overwhelmed, knocked unconscious, and physically dragged inside of the vault where they cut out his heart. While many questions remained on the origins of the plague Septimius and Flavius had unleashed upon Siwa, with the vault's opening being the big one thing was clear. Once Hepzibah was given a proper farewell, Bayek would hunt down Flavius, putting an end to his cruelty. With his best friend's favorite weapon in his hand, Bayek would learn Septimius and Flavius have actually split up. Flavius headed in the direction of the city of Cyrene, while Septimius decided to return to Alexandria. The best decision here was to split up. Aya opted to go after Septimius, while Bayek would follow whatever trail he could pick up on Flavius. While hunting his son's and best friend's killer, he would come across a small farm that appeared to have suffered the same fate as Siwa. As a matter of fact, Siwan farmers taken from their homes as slaves were brought here by Flavius, who shared stories of him wielding Alexander's spear powered with a golden orb. He'd become more powerful than ever imagined, and thanks to a woman by the name of Praxila, she would help him come into contact with a man by the name of Diocles. Diocles was her contact within the city of Cyrene, who was already having trouble with Flavius' subordinate, a local magistrate by the name of Leander. Diocles would provide Bayek with the final location of where Flavius is hiding. He's up in the Acropolis at the top of the city of Cyrene. The building is heavily guarded, so Bayek must take a more delicate approach.
Do you think I can't feel you skulking in the shadows, Bayek of Siwa?
I have followed your path of murder and madness all the way from my homeland. And now, you will answer for my son's death, Roman!
No, Egyptian. Now you will bow before your god!
Finally identified as the lion and the man behind all of Bayek's torment, the madness come to an end once and for all here. The fight, especially compared to everything Bayek has ever faced before, was fairly unusual. Flavius was capable of harnessing the power of the Apple of Eden, allowing him to call upon powerful hallucinations and stopping Bayek in his tracks, practically freezing him in time, all while taunting the Egyptian to finally bow before his god. Bayek had no interest in bending the knee to such a cold-blooded murderer. Embarrassingly, even with the help of his supernatural capabilities, Flavius would be bested by Bayek, or perhaps it was a testament to the Medjay's willpower and sheer training. With this defeat, a year's worth of pain and vengeance would all be laid bare, but Bayek would hesitate at the last minute. He would drop to his knees and exclaim that he can't finish the job. After all this time of searching and knowing exactly what he wanted and what he was going to do, to everyone responsible for the death of his son, for everyone responsible, for the man responsible, for killing Khemu, for costing him his marriage, the love that him and Aya once shared, the beauty and late night constellation watches with his son, all of that was taken away along with his best friend. Yet in this moment, in the time that he had spent countless nights dreaming of, he hesitated, until he was truly given the real peace he properly needed all along.
Come on! Finish me! You coward! The waste of time!
I can't do it! I can't do it!
It's alright, Papa.
No. I will lose you forever.
Not forever. I will be waiting for you in the field of reeds.
Khemu's blessing and assurance of greeting his father in the afterlife would finally lift the weight off Bayek's shoulders. He can now rest knowing his son's spirit is finally at peace. Flavius's death would allow Bayek to secure the Apple of Eden, determined to make sure it will never be discovered again while wanting to let Aya know Khemu is finally at peace. Bayek would head back to Alexandria, where one more final thing would be mourned, the last of whatever remained between him and Aya.
Bayek. It has been too long.
Flavius is dead. I have gone through shit to get our son out of the Duat. Khemu is at peace.
May he walk in the field of reeds.
A small moment of peace and happiness quickly gives way to unsettling news. Dedicated more than ever before, Aya has made plans to head to Rome to finish the order off once and for all. Caesar, Septimius, and Cleopatra have all completely abandoned Egypt, leaving the country in an absolute state of chaos. The state of affairs demand all of their attention, but Aya aims to right the wrong of putting Cleopatra in power. With the help of Phoxidas and Phanos, they have allied with Cassius and Brutus to sail across the sea and deal with Septimius and Caesar within their own country. It's all very much to take in, especially since Bayek doesn't even support her decision to even leave. It's all completely just dumped on him, and as he says, she's wasting her energy on such ludicrous ambitions. But there really isn't enough time for him to properly get everything off his chest or even process everything as Aya is rushed out of the room to follow behind her allies and sail to Rome. As they leave, Bayek takes the opportunity to hide the Apple of Eden, this golden orb that has granted Flavius so much power. Determined that it never be discovered again, he hides it in one of the chests here within this hidden chamber. And then he proceeds to go after Aya, as he doesn't want this to be their final interaction together. Bayek would race all across Alexandria and find Aya on the edge of a beach, staring off into the ocean. As they enjoy the sunlight together in silence for a moment, Bayek takes the initiative to share that all the darkness they've gone through, all the killing, must have been for a reason. Egypt has fallen. Greece has too. Rome would soon follow along with every other corner of the world falling to the creed without anyone knowing. Aya, in response, would share her mistakes of killing publicly, and vows to not do it again. If she was to take another life, it would be in the shadows. They will assassinate in the dark, and only those worthy of it. Cold, calculated poets of the kill. This, Bayek agrees.
I am fine with this. I am not a father anymore. I am not a husband. I am not a Medjay. I am a hidden one.
Yes. We are the hidden ones.
We sharpen our blades and pull what hope is left from this foul earth.
Good, Bayek of Siwa. What are you of now?
A new creed. Ours is finished.
Hamu's eagle skull necklace would be the emblem that their new creed rallies behind. With the death of his boy and his marriage, Bayek and Aya would create something greater than themselves. As Aya wipes away her tears, this will be the last time she sees her former husband, as she ventures off to Rome. Now we know her time there would see her kill Septimius and initiating the assassination of Caesar, a few days after which she'd appear in Cleopatra's home. Out of respect and courtesy of the 5 years she served underneath her, she would spare Cleopatra, giving her a chance of redemption. But the main thing, really, is in her letter to Bayek, she would announce the death of Aya. As she oversees the foundation of the Roman Brotherhood, she became known as the Hidden One Amunet, while Bayek built the Egyptian Bureau, creating the initiations of cutting off one's finger, performing the leap of faith, and moving in the shadows and only killing those deserving. Aya's letter informing Bayek on her accomplishments is met with validation, happiness, confirmation that what they were doing, what they sacrificed between the two of them, was not in vain. They were doing the good work of the people that is powered and driven by the spirit of their son. With the conclusion of Aya's letter, Bayek would hear Hamu's voice one last time, reminding his father that he is always with him, waiting for the day that he does meet him once again in the field of reeds.
May your victories multiply.
Papa? John.